Hey there, welcome to Board Game Hot Takes, the podcast where we give our immediate reactions to the hottest board games just minutes after playing them. My name's Adam.
This is Tim.
And this is Steve.
And we're going to give our hot takes on the game that we just finished playing, Viticulture.
Before we provide a description of the game we're playing today, remember that you can join into the conversation if you follow us on Twitter at BG_Hot Takes or on Facebook at Board Game Hot Takes for the latest conversations about the games we're playing. And please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to us to help more people find the show. Now let's jump into a description of the game. In Viticulture, you play as a Tuscan vineyard owner trying to develop a thriving wine business. This is a worker placement game where you use workers on various action spaces on a shared board that will allow you to take actions related to developing your vineyard, including planting and harvesting grapes, converting grapes into wine, and fulfilling wine orders, as well as giving wine tours, hiring new workers, building structures, and inviting visitors in the form of cards to perform unique effects for you. These actions are split across 2 seasons, summer and winter, so you have to carefully plan how many workers you use in the summer if you want to have enough set aside for the winter actions. Depending on player count, some of the action spaces will offer an additional bonus to the first player to use that space in the current year. Each player also has one special worker, called a Grande Worker, that is allowed to use a space that has already been filled with other workers. Each round, the starting player is determined by selection on a wake-up track, where players can choose to take stronger bonuses for going later in the round. Points will primarily be gained by filling wine orders, but can also be gained through some bonuses as well as visitor cards. The game end is triggered when one player reaches 20 points, and then the current year is finished. The player who ends the game with the most points wins the game. Viticulture was designed by Jamie Stegmaier and published by Stonemaier Games. All right, let's get into the conversation. So let's start with you, Adam. This is your first time playing Viticulture. What did you think of the mechanisms? Anything that stood out to you right away?
So yeah, the first thing I noticed about the mechanisms here is the roosters, right? So you have these little roosters that you decide how during that round or during that season, that year, I guess there's a summer season and a winter season. Well, there's all the seasons. During that year, you're going to decide what order you go in. And the earlier order you go in, the less beneficial the benefit you get. So, if you go first, you don't get any benefit. If you go second, you get a better benefit than going first because it's something. And if as you go down the line, there's 7 choices total, and presumably, the lower you go in turn order, the better benefit you get. So that mechanism was something that really stood out to me as kind of cool and unique to this game.
Yeah, I absolutely love this. I wish that more games did this, to be honest. And I'm sure that there have been some others that use this kind of mechanism for choosing first player. Like, it's kind of neat because basically there is a first player token and it goes around the board counterclockwise. And then whoever has that first player token is the first one to choose where they go on the board. So they get the first choice every round and that shifts up. But beyond that, the whole rest of the player decisions in that round, we'll call it in the year, are based on where they set that marker. But the different bonuses you get based on where you set your rooster are so fun. Like, if you really want to go first, you can go into the number 1 spot, but you get no bonuses for it. So you're giving up, some potentially good things, but then you get the first shot at some of the worker placement bonuses you can get. But some of the other ones are, there's some card bonuses, and the bigger, this kind of more powerful cards come further down the track. You can get a dollar if you just really need some money that round. But if you go all the way down to the 6th position, you can get a victory point, which is quite big in this game. Like, a victory point, it's a game that ends at 20 points. And, oftentimes you're going to be kind of decided by tiebreakers right at the end. And then the 7th position is an extra worker. And if if you're familiar with worker placement, that's always a hugely powerful advantage. So it's really fun making that decision every time and choosing, like, how important is it for me to go early versus just getting one of these really great bonuses. I love that. So it's awesome. Steve, any thoughts on that?
I love the rooster. I love that Adam called them chickens most of the game. I think it's really unique and just super fun.
Right on. Okay, cool. So other than that, I mean, this game, as I mentioned in the description, is a worker placement game, and it's been around for a little while. I think this game came out in 2013. So of course there were a handful of worker placement games before that. It wasn't the first one that did it, but it was surprisingly fresh to me Full disclosure, I had played this game several years back once, and then when the new digital app came out last year, I played one or two just kind of learning games on it, but I haven't really, really gotten into the game recently. So this was, I knew the rules of the game, but it was still a fairly fresh experience for me. And there's a couple things that worker placement does really neat here. One is the worker placement spots are set into seasons. So that's cool because you kind of have to make a decision, do I want to use a bunch of workers here, but then I can't do as much in the next season, or should I kind of try to reserve them, or do you split them up? So that's just a fun decision. And then the second part is we played a 3-player game tonight, and you can play this from, 2 to 6 players, or there's even a solo mode. But if you play 2 players, there's basically one worker, one worker can go on any one of the spots on the board. But if you play 3 or 4 players or more, then there's a second spot that workers can go on that gives you an extra bonus for using that spot. And that was really fun as well. That was almost like Rooster level fun. It's so much better to get a double action on a place. So you're either going to plant a field, second field, or you're going to draw. You almost get a double of what that action is just by being the first one to go there. And that was cool. I liked it. What about you, Adam?
Yeah, so that was rad. So that goes hand in hand with a chicken action. So if you're going first, you get that first bid at putting your worker in the double up action for the most part, or there's some little bonus for getting your guy out there. So that was quite enjoyable. That's really neat. So I haven't, this is the first time playing. I haven't done it at any other player count than 3. So I don't know it any other way. So I can't really compare. But Steve, you played it at a few other player counts, right? What's your take on other player counts?
I've only had the chance to play it at 2 and 3 players. But in my opinion, the 3-player access to the bonus worker action spot is significant, and it's a lot of fun. So I did not enjoy it as much at 2 players, but I enjoyed it tonight with 3.
Yeah, I can totally see that. So one other mechanism I want to call out, maybe you have some thoughts on that. There's a lot of hand management in this game too. So there's 4 different colors of cards. They're laid out across the top. And some of your worker placement spots and the rooster action spots involve drawing these cards into your hand. And I thought that was a great aspect of this too. It has a very unique hand management aspect in addition to worker placement. Those kind of tie together. So you're kind of balancing turn order, hand management, and how you're going to play those cards all at the same time.
Yeah, and it was kind of exceptional here in that there is 4 different decks of cards. So you're drawing them all into your hand, but they do different things. They're the 2 colors of visitors, which just seem to be a variety of different things, but you can only play one of the colors in each of the seasons. And then there's the grapes, and then there's the orders. So they all do different things. Yeah, it's really neat. You do have a hand limit, so you have to be careful about getting, just kind of focusing on one type of card and filling up your hand with those if you want to take advantage of some of the other ones. Yeah, this is a thing that I actually really like about Stonemaier games. Well, I'd let Jamie Stegmaier's other designs that I've played. Tapestry is a really great example of this. And I think that there's even some criticism about this mechanism, but not for me personally. I love when a Euro game that is very skill focused and that, you do have to think and plan and strategize has a deck of cards, in this case, multiples, that really change every game. Based on the cards you draw, it's going to give you some different direction to go in. You get to try to optimize those cards and take advantage of them and exploit them. Sometimes you have to tactically shift to kind of, make sure that you can take advantage of them or aren't like left behind with them. And I really like that in a Euro game. I've mentioned this in the past, even in that I actually, except in a few rare situations, I don't like games where everything can be scripted, where if you've played it a handful of times, what the correct opening move is, what you should do in the first 10 turns to get, to kind of get to the right place so that you're set up for the game and you've got the best strategy. And I think a randomness in a deck of cards can really fix that. Obviously, there can be concerns with balance in a deck of cards. This was one play with me, a couple of plays in the past. I'm sure that there are potential for balance issues. I don't even care. It's too much fun to get all the variety in the cards there that it offsets for me, the risk of some balance issues playing with cards like this. So I really love that. I love that part of this game and other Stonemaier games and other midweight Euros that use a deck of cards for that type of situation.
I think that the Card drawing is really interesting, and I do like the variety in the cards. It can be slightly frustrating with not drawing the cards that you were hoping for, but there are a lot of opportunities to draw cards, and you do have to draw them intentionally. You need to draw wine orders early so that you know what types of wines you should be working towards. If you want to have a good shot at making a lot of points. If you just wait until the end, until you have a bunch of wines to start drawing wine orders, you're probably not going to have as much success. So I think it's interesting.
And much like a good winery crushes their grapes, Steve, you crushed Tim and I at this game. So what you're saying is something I'm going to take notes on, and maybe I'll try that next time I play. I would say I agree, but I would say I have now been enlightened in which order to draw the cards.
Yeah, that is something that you get exposure to with more play experience, for sure.
Now, what I think is really interesting here from a thematic tie into the mechanisms is the fact that it tries to kind of focus on what are all the things you have to do running a vineyard. You have to plant your grapes, and you have to harvest grapes, and you have to then turn those grapes into wine, and you have to let the grapes age, and you have to sell the wine that you've created, that you're fulfilling those orders. So there's a lot of different steps you have to do here. And that's kind of unique for worker placement too, in that your worker placement spots are not just, I'm going to get this resource and then this other resource and then fill an order with it. Here it's like kind of setting up a whole line, a production chain that you have to do. Like, I have to have the grapes in my field. So I've got to start by finding some grapes and planting them. So there's a whole like process you have to go through here. And I'll tell you that after the first couple of times I'd played it in the past, I was a little concerned that this would fall into Agricola territory for me. And the reason I don't love Agricola, I do like it. I think it's a really fun, tight worker placement game. But the reason I don't love it is that it starts to feel repetitive, and that you have to kind of follow that same path and do the same actions every round. There are some cards that will shift that a little bit in Agricola, but not to the same extent here. I don't get that same sense here. I feel like this game you could replay a lot of times, and because of the variety in the cards and the orders and the grapes that you draw, I think it's going to really change how this game feels most of the time. Maybe that would change over time. But Steve, you've only played this a few times. Have you started to feel like it like the actions you're taking to kind of go through that process, are they starting to feel repetitive, or do you feel like that's a process that you enjoy starting from scratch every time and kind of going through that whole process?
I have two comments about that. Even though you all have to go through the same process, the randomness of the decks is going to make that play order sequence different for each player. So you're not always competing for the same spots every time. For instance, you mentioned Agricola. Once you played Agricola a few times with the same players, everyone is competing for the specific same spots the same time. You know, if somebody takes the first play order, that they're going to go in one of a few specific spots. And if you need that spot, you have to go first. I don't think this game suffers that because of the deck randomness. The second thing that I really like about this game as a worker placement game is the Grande Worker. Even though the number of worker placement spots for each action are very limited, the Grande Worker gives each player the opportunity to still take an action that they really need, and so you don't get shut out. You only get one Grande Worker, and you have to decide which season to play it in, but your action choices are just much less restricted. So I really enjoy that.
I agree, Steve. And you mentioned the seasons. I want to talk about the seasons. So the board is kind of divided up into two sections for where you can place your workers. You have the left side, which is the summer season. And so you kind of have to decide ahead of time, okay, am I going to use my workers over here, or am I going to save them for kind of the next session, the winter season? And it makes thematic sense. So Chris would be super happy right now, even though it's a Euro, he may, it's a Euro, so he probably hates it. But seeing that the thematic tie-ins are there, maybe Chris would enjoy this one. In the summer, you have the options to plant grapes and you can buy a field and prep for the upcoming growing season, which is just cool to me. Like, so you have that early decision there. How many workers do I want to use in the summer season on the left side of the board? And then how many am I going to save for kind of the second half of that round, the winter season, on the right side of the board, which is when you're going to harvest your grapes and you're going to smash your grapes and turn them into wine and put them in the cellar and train new workers and get ready for the next season. So I think that whole summer, winter season kind of divide is a really nice thematic tie-in.
Yeah, totally. And you asked how Chris would feel about it. He actually loves this game. He bought it. He's had it. I haven't had a chance to play it with him, but he's played it with his family a couple times and absolutely loves it. So I think he'll miss out. He'll be disappointed that he missed that on this game and this conversation tonight, because I know he's a fan. One last thing about the mechanisms here. This is really minor, but the starting game setup is pretty fun. You're handed a mama card and a papa card. You're handing two of each, right? The mama card, basically, it's going to show you how many basic workers you start with and which cards you start with. And then the papa card is going to show you typically how much money you're going to start with, and then whether you're going to start with either like an extra worker or a building to start with, or a few other things. And it's really fun to make that decision at the start. It really shifts how each player kind of begins the game. You know, like the one of us, I think it was Steve, had two grape cards in his hand to start with, and I had none. So he didn't even care. He didn't have any need to go after grapes in the first round, versus I had order cards. So I knew that I had to go after grapes, try to see if I could find grapes that would match the orders to try to get some things processing there. So it's pretty cool. You get some fun choices at the beginning, but it also gives some asymmetric start. Not drastically. It doesn't change the rules for anybody, but it shifts it enough to make it, again, an interesting worker placement game where everybody isn't going after the same things in the first round. Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts on mechanisms?
I guess I want to say the visitor cards are kind of neat. They're all relatively unique and they have such different powers, but none of them seem crazy unbalanced. They're just so varied and different from one another, but they all give you some awesome stuff if you can pull them off. So those visitor cards, there's some summer visitor cards and there's winter visitor cards. And getting a hold of them is a little tricky, and then playing them, if you can play them in the right order, they're pretty powerful. And then, so I like the aspect of the visitor cards there.
Yeah, I like that a lot too. Now, I have heard some criticisms about this game that you potentially could, with the right set of visitor cards and really focusing on those, that you could potentially end up winning the game while never fulfilling a wine order at all. And that's possible. I think it'd be a little risky to try to pursue that. You might be able to pull it off, but I think you'd also be at risk of not getting the cards that gave you points. And on the meantime, your opponents are kind of building up their wine and stuff like that. So you probably have to both take the risk of going that direction and get lucky enough to get the right cards for it. But that said, I could see that being a valid criticism, especially from a thematic perspective, that it feels like you're kind of playing a different game. It doesn't bother me. I think it's kind of neat that there's an alternate way to get points and do things, especially if you're falling behind and, you know, someone else has clearly like gotten a leg up on you and you're a couple of rounds behind and getting some wine planted. It's nice that you've got a chance to move in a different direction and try to go after points in a different way. So it doesn't bother me, but I've heard that criticism before. I do like, though, I agree with you, Adam, the fact that every single card is different and significantly different. Like I didn't see a single one today that we saw that really felt like it was doing the same thing with just slightly different amounts. It was like completely different things that those cards were doing. And that's fun. And I think that's got to take a lot of work. I think that you got to give props to the designers, Jamie Stegmaier and Alan Stone, on this for putting all of that together and testing it and getting something that where almost every card has some fun mechanism in the right situation. I think it's really fun.
I think one of the things that is really interesting about the worker cards is that most of them have alternate choices on each card. So not only are the cards varied, but they have different combinations of actions, and some of them even allow you to take both actions if you're willing to give up victory points. Mm-hmm. Right. So I think there's just so many interesting different combinations of things you can do. It's really fun.
Yeah, totally. Right on. All right, cool. Well, why don't we jump into the production of the game? So, Steve, have you seen the physical version, or have you only played this one online also?
I have only played it online. I will, just as a sidebar, I will say, since you mentioned that Chris played this with his family, one of the the first time I ever played this was with 6-year-old, and she kicked my butt. So even though this game is very strategic and complicated, it is accessible to, I think, a pretty wide audience. Now, she's not your normal 6-year-old. She plays games all the time, but still, I think that's an interesting aspect of a strategy game.
Well, it's funny, Adam. So we finished the first game now. One of the things, and I know we're not jumping into the production conversation yet, but one of the things you mentioned maybe halfway through the game or a little earlier, you said, wow, this game is surprisingly complex. How do you feel at the end of the game? Do you still feel it's that level of complexity, or do you feel like that has kind of shifted a little bit for you?
Again, what does complexity mean? Different things to different people.
Yeah.
But for me, there's the forward-looking aspect of this, which is what brings in the complexity to me. You have to plant grapes in your field, and then you have to harvest the grapes. So you can only plant grapes in the summer season, the first half of each round, and you can only harvest grapes for the most part in the winter season. And then you can convert those grapes to wine. It looks, if I'm saying this correct, it looks like also in the winter season. And then you can only fulfill orders in the winter season. So you really have to be planning your steps. You know, you have to be looking ahead. You can't just be like, oh, I'm going to do this action because I can get lots of points right now. You really have to have a couple of steps ahead. And again, this is just my first play. So maybe I'm not the quickest on the uptake. So maybe things would sink in on subsequent plays. But I feel there is that aspect of having to look ahead and having a goal and really planning for that goal. And you can really kind of hose yourself if you're not taking appropriate steps to look out for the direction you want to go.
Yeah, I agree. I think the first time I played this, I felt like the game was much higher in complexity. And the group of people I played it with on my first play, they were a little more casual gamers, and they felt it was overly complex for them. But after having been introduced to many more worker placement games and kind of Euro games, the actual actions are not complicated. The mechanisms are not complicated. It's a very basic worker placement with some fun little added, the little bonuses are a nice thing. But that is where the complexity comes in. I think you're right, Adam, is the planning, kind of setting yourself up and understanding. Again, you kind of have to think through what is the actual lifespan of a grape into a bottle of wine. You have to think through all those steps, and they try to put that in here to match the theme. And that's what makes it challenging to wrap your head around. I feel like after a game or two, that part of it is just going to be kind of the natural mechanisms, like that you just absorb that, and it's not going to be something that is challenging to keep up with. But it does feel a lot heavier on a first play than it probably will be on future plays.
Yeah, I'd say with some experience that is pretty accurate. I think that you'll be able to focus more on the planning and the strategy and have to worry less about remembering, I need to remember to harvest my grapes before I try to make wine.
But I enjoy that thematic tie-in, and it makes a lot of sense. So I think I do think you have to have that forward looking, which is it's the right amount of complexity, I think, for this type of game. You have to have a few steps ahead looking at where your grapes are going to be in that aging process where they become more valuable as they get older too. That's just all very nice thematic tie-in, and has that nice, not overly complex, but a nice little, think ahead mechanism.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, let's actually jump into production now. And I have actually seen the physical version of this game. I've played with, like I said, one time several years back. I think for its time, it was very high quality production. I think in modern times, it's very, it's pretty average, but, it's nice enough, nice, unique meeples for each of the buildings that you build. For your workers versus your Grande Workers are different shapes. Your rooster meeples, like, the score markers are supposed to be little corks, like bottle corks. So that's a fun little thematic tie-in. And then your income trackers are wine bottles. So fun that all those pieces exist. Nothing that really super stands out to me at this point. Beth Sobel was the artist for this. So it's kind of her style. She does very natural, like kind of realistic artwork. What do you guys think? Anything that stands out to you from a production perspective?
The only thing that really stands out to me is just, as you already mentioned, the various fun shapes of the tracker markers. The little wine bottle is fun, and the rooster's fun. They're just fun. I don't find the art to be particularly interesting, but The board is nice. I don't have a lot of other comments on the production though.
I enjoy it. So yeah, it's not overly like, boom, check me out, production 2000. But it's clean. I'm looking at some of the cards. There's some nice cypress trees and some wine barrels. And looking at the grapes, there's a little zoom in on the type of grape. So I'm looking at the Cabernet Sauvignon, and there's like, just some red grapes coming down from a vine and some vineyards in the background of that. And the art, I think it's clean. It's not hokey. I don't get the like cheesy kind of cartoony sense, which I'm not a big fan of. And it just looks like professional art all around. And the meeples are nothing special. They're kind of cool. They're like the French dude with a little, I don't know, big old field hat on. I don't know what to call it, but it draws you in thematically. It's not a turn off thematically at all. So I like it. I enjoy it.
Yeah, I think it fits with the theme. It's ever since I've seen it, it's never really grabbed me and said like, I got to play this game because of the art, but I think it fits fine. And when you were playing it here, it's nice. It feels like you're, hanging out, crushing grapes in a peaceful, Italian villa, like vineyard. So I think it works totally. One thing I definitely want to call out here is the user experience from the graphic design. I think is top notch here. There is almost nothing that we needed to look into the rule book for other than us just like wondering if there was some weird exception that we needed to look up. Everything is spelled out on the board. Like the way that they did the end round kind of instructions on the right side of the board. I love that. I think that anytime when you're going to have rounds that have kind of unique phases to it, put that information out on the board so that everybody can kind of just follow it without having to reference the rule book the first half dozen plays. It works really well here. Otherwise, the rooster track is super intuitive. The worker placement spaces are all super intuitive. The cost of the buildings you're going to build and the way that the wine crush pads and the cellars and everything work, it just all makes completely perfect sense for me. What did you guys think? Did you have any bad feelings about the user experience, or did it seem to work pretty well for you as well?
For me, from a first-time player coming in, the user experience was outstanding. Like you said, Tim, that little scroll on the right side, it outlines every season. So just kind of your round order, spring, summer, winter, or spring, summer, fall, winter. And then at the end of the year, everything you do, it just outlines it right there. It's super simple. It's so nice. And then each of the worker placement spots, it has it right there, right underneath where you're going to put your workers. It tells you what to do and exactly what to do. Your player board has the same thing. It has just simple, easy to follow what to do, the cost for everything. There's no confusing iconography at all that I can think of. I never had maybe a couple questions about how to add the wine up correctly, but that was just, you look at little tokens and it makes sense. Once you hear one explanation of it one time, you're never going to forget. I don't know, Steve, after, playing it 4 or 5 times, what do you think?
I think it's outstanding as far as the iconography goes, and it's very straightforward.
Yep.
Cool. I got one last thing I want to comment on the production, and this is I'm going to get on a soapbox a little bit here. This is not unique to this particular game. I hate rounded white-bordered Euro cards.
I remember you said that one of the last games, Maracaibo.
Thank you. Yeah. So Maracaibo is a brand new game, just came out this last year, and it has the same exact style of card with it. I don't know why it bothers me so much. I think it's because this exact shape, size, and style of card was used 15 years ago. It's exactly what a Settlers of Catan card looks like. It's exactly what
I was just gonna say Catan.
It's like everything, like every old Euro, like old ugly Euro, the ugliest games you can think of use these cards. And then you look at cards like the Scythe cards, Everdell. Like let the art bleed to the edges or throw a black border on there so it doesn't feel so non-standard. I don't know. Don't do this in games anymore, designers or publishers, whoever's making these choices, don't do it in games anymore. It just makes it feel old. Viticulture is starting to show its age. Those cards are probably the biggest factor. If you updated those and let the coloring bleed to the edges, it would feel like a more modern game than it does today. So don't print new cards like that.
This is a 2013 game, so you got to cut it a little slack. It's getting a little.
I don't know. That's 100%. You know what? It's a product of its time, and it's fine. I caught it tonight, and I just don't want to see it anymore. So that's my take on white border small Euro style cards, it can be done
in 20 years. It's going to come back. It's going to be the new fad. It's going to be the fad again. Like, all these retro cards I got, they're super rad.
Adam, I know people thought bell bottoms were going to come back too, and they didn't. So every trend doesn't recycle.
Bootcut jeans, man. That's a new slang for bell bottoms.
All right, fair enough. All right, well, let's just jump over to favorite moments of the game tonight. So anything that stood out to you, Steve, we'll let you start. Any moment of tonight's game that you want to call out tonight?
Well, two moments of the game. One was a low point and one was a high point. My least favorite moment of the game was that I forgot to take an action in a summer season, and it forced me to take some very suboptimal actions in my winter season. So even though I didn't like it, I like that the game forces you to make the correct decisions to optimize your play, and you can't recover. Like, you're not going to get that back. You have to wait a whole nother year before you can harvest or plant or do whatever you needed to do that you forgot to do last year. So I like that, even though I didn't like what happened to me. My other favorite moment of the game was I had collected several wine order cards in the beginning/middle of the game, and I had been planning to be able to sell all my wine by the end, and I had to make sure all my grapes got harvested and all my grapes got crushed and turned into wines, and that I had enough actions left to actually sell all those wine orders. And it's very tight with everyone trying to sell all their wine at the end and convert all their grapes at the end. And it ended up working out, and I was super thrilled by it.
That's awesome. Steve, I have to wonder what a 4-player game of this would be like, because you don't get more action spaces in a 4-player game. Yeah. But think of like that last round or 2 rounds, trying to finish up the things you need to do to get the final grapes and make the final wine. It's like we were really, all of us kind of like, I think Steve's the only one that managed to get ahead in that last round, where Adam and I both were like, oh my God, I needed every single action that just got blocked off. And if you had a 4-player game, you would have that, even more. I just can't even imagine how tight that would get.
I would think it makes that number 1 chicken spot like that much more critical. Like that'd be a super, those 1, 2, 3 spots would go quick, because you need those actions, and those bonus actions would add so much more to your point tally at the end, I would think.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's great. I think that what you just called out, Steve, both of those situations comes from this being a very tight and very strong, the use of the worker placement mechanism. The fact that worker placement is just an action selection mechanism, but it's allowing people to interact with those actions that you can choose from. And I think that Viticulture does it in a really suboptimal way to make it feel like every decision is important and when you use it is important. And I really like that.
The opposite of suboptimal, but yes.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. That optimal.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was like suboptimal. Wait,
what? So I'll just call it, really quickly. Mine it's kind of the same. We came into the last round where if I could have just filled a second order in the last round, I think I could have gotten to the 25 points. I think Steve still would have beat me on the tiebreakers, but I was so close. I was like if I had just had one of my grapes up 1 level higher, I could have filled 2 wine orders, even the way things spelled out. And so it was that close to just not getting planned right. And I loved how tight that was. Now, it did lead to some analysis paralysis for me, which isn't super common. Would you agree, Adam? Like, I don't tend to take a long time on my turns in most games, right?
I would agree for the most part. You have when it's critical, and you take your time to think it out at the critical points, there's nothing wrong with that at all. So in general, you're no Chris when it comes to analysis paralysis.
Well, I would say though that I definitely felt it tonight more than I usually do. There were several turns where I really had to stop and think and try to calculate out, like, if I do this in this 2 seasons and then, next round, can I actually get to this? It was cool. It was really fun decisions, but it does lead to a little AP. And I could see if you had a few players that suffered from that, this game could probably run a little bit long. But I really enjoyed that part of it. I thought it was fun.
And that's what I'm saying with the complexity aspect for me is how much do I get AP when I'm trying to plan ahead and think of the moves? And to me, that's what makes the game more complex, is when I'm like, oh crap, I have to think about this, and how long is it going to take me to figure out a good move to do here? But for me, it was fun watching Steve just crush it. The final score, Steve was up at 25, and both you and I, Tim, were down here at 19. We didn't even break the in-game barrier. And that last round for me was the high point. Steve got in there. He got to fill 2 orders, get all those points. And then I forget who was, well, I have it up here still. It looks like Tim. Well, Tim, you were first, and you didn't take that turn first. You had to do something else first. And I didn't even, but you took the second fill spot. So there's 3 spots out there. It was only 2 spots with 3 players. You took that second spot, got some points.
Yeah.
And that would have given me, had I been able to get in there, I would have got some cheap wine order to fill, and I would have gotten 2 points. That would have put me up at 21.
But you took the used 2 blue cards, 2 winter. Like, would you have been there if you hadn't been able to use both those winter visitors?
Exactly. So had I been able to do that first one I did and the second one I did, so it's a balancing act.
Yeah.
And, there's never, you're just running out of spots the whole time, and you're watching the game like slowly drift away from you. And it's tight, and it's brutal. And I like that this game has an edge to it where you can hurt yourself, and you can, if you don't plan it out right, it's going to sting you later on.
Yeah. One other thing I was just thinking about is that there was a point in the game where I was up at like 10 or 11 points. Steve was at -1, and Adam was sitting around 4 or 5 points. And I had a plan. I was like, I've got wine orders that are coming in. There are going to be some pretty big ones. I had the most residual income coming in at this point. I thought about halfway through the game, there's no way I can lose this game. This is my game. I'm going to win this one in a pretty big way. It was a very close game. It came down to the last round. Steve ended up winning significantly because of one final order that he filled. But Adam and I we went to the tiebreaker on the Lyras for second and third place. And that was cool. And most of that came from my early game with trying to use those cards and taking advantage of them. But then I kind of ran out of steam there. And Adam, on the other hand, you really took advantage of them late game. Like, you kind of saved them up and then just like abused them the last few turns. So it was pretty neat to see how much the game shifted around and how different strategies really changed where things went. But no, there wasn't like one like automatic leader based on an early strategy that happened. I thought that was pretty neat.
Yeah, if I wouldn't have been able to fill that last wine order, I would have ended it. Well, I probably could have done something else for 1 point. So I would have ended up at 20 or 21 points, but it would have been a much closer game, much closer.
Yeah, he probably still would have won. It would have been closer. Yeah.
There's that acceleration moment too, which is nice, right around, I don't know, the mid game, 10, 11, 12 points. Then, there's only so it took 3-4 rounds to get 10, 11, 12 points. And then those last 2 rounds go quick. It's an acceleration for sure. And that's a nice.
Yeah, because it's 2 orders. 2 orders gets you another 10 points, basically.
Exactly. It's a nice crescendo to that in game, and who's going to be able to fulfill the most orders the last round or the last 2 rounds. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I like that. All right, cool. Well, let's talk about our final question is, would you request to play this game again? I'll jump in on the first one this time. Heck yeah, this is a really awesome worker placement game. I'm a big fan of worker placement. If you listen to the show, it's something I look for a lot of the time and call out. And this is an older game, and I think this game still really holds up. I think it was still fun to play at this point after playing many other worker placement games. I think it still does some things better than more modern worker placement have done. I love the turn order tracker. I love the bonuses. I love the season separation. I love the planning. I love the cards. This is a game I think I'm going to buy now. Like, I've played it a few times over the years. It's always kind of been on my want to play more and want to own list. And I think I'm going to buy this game because I just absolutely had a fantastic experience tonight. And it reminds me of my past experience with it, where every time I finished, I was like, that was really cool. I want to think of how I could do that better next time. And this just seems like a fun game. And there's a few things to explore with it too. So, I think there's a lot of gameplay in this base game, but there's several expansions out for the game. There's the big Tuscany expansion, which adds like a bigger board and a bunch of other modules that would be fun. There's an area control mechanism of it where like there's a little map that you can try to, have like control of different regions of Tuscany or something like that. So some pretty neat cool mechanisms that are added there. There's another expansion called I think it's Visitors from the Rhine Valley or something, where it replaces the visitor cards and it makes them focus just on, instead of point generation, on the winemaking part of the game. And I'd love to try that out too. So I feel like this game has a lot of legs. It's a game that I feel like I would always be happy to go back and play. Not too complex to get into and teach new people, but some really deep thinky strategy here for a game of its weight. So I will be requesting to play it again. Adam, what about you?
Coming into tonight, you guys were talking about viticulture ahead of time, and I was a little hesitant. I was like, oh man, I've been on the fence about some Stonemeyer games. Tapestry, I'm always getting my butt kicked. I'm not quite sure what to do. I haven't quite figured it out yet. Scythe, it's okay. It's pretty cool, but I'm just like, it's all right. And then viticulture, make some wine. I'd looked at it early. Maybe I want to get this game, maybe not. And that was kind of like 2 years ago when I first got into board gaming. So you guys are talking about tonight. I was a little like, all right, whatever. I'll give it a try. I was kind of pushing for some other games, maybe a little here and there. But the games you guys bring to the table are always end up being pretty friggin' awesome. And this game, it blew me away. By the end of it, I was thrilled. I was having such a good time. The mechanisms were just pretty unique. It was tense coming into the end, and there's spots I wanted to get. There was a fight for each of these spots, and I loved it. I think I would request to play this game again for sure. And it would be fun to get out, a bottle of, get some Italian, get some Chianti out, get some French wines going, get some, have a little wine tasting thing going with this kind of thing and make a whole night of it. So yeah, I had a blast playing this game.
Awesome. Steve, what about you?
Well, I think the wine tasting pairing sounds super fun. I think it's interesting that you used the legs reference since that's wine related. But yeah, I really enjoyed this game. I would definitely play it again. I think I've enjoyed the experience more every time I've played this game because you have a little more understanding of what your options might be as you play the game. Like you mentioned, how you went pretty heavy on the visitor cards early, Tim, and Adam kind of got into the visitor cards late, and I kind of avoided them this game. It wasn't necessarily intentional. It just kind of depends on where your rooster goes and what worker spots are available to you. But every time I've played this game, it's different and it's fun, and I would definitely play it again.
All right, great. Well, I think that will wrap up our conversation on viticulture. So let's talk about some things that we're excited about in the world of board gaming this week, right after this. All right, welcome back. So let's talk about a couple things that we're interested in the world of board gaming tonight. Adam, what do you have? What are you thinking about this week in board games?
I've been talking about it a lot lately. Dune Imperium. I've got it to the table a couple of times. I'm ready to get it to the virtual table and get us playing this game. It is awesome. So looking forward to whenever that happens.
Yeah, I think we're going to be playing and reviewing this one very soon. So if you're listening to this and you're interested, you'll get to hear our thoughts in the near future. Everything I've heard about it, I love the worker placement and deck building mechanisms are two of my favorite. I understand there is a bit of like area control and combat and stuff like that in it, which means that you guys are going to step all over all my plans and ruin them all. So I don't know how much I'm going to love it, but I'm looking forward to trying it out and seeing how it goes.
No, there's enough. It's like almost purely, there's a little bit of combat at the end of each round. It's kind of a little fight at the end of each round. And then you're reset and it goes back to worker placement. You build up your troops. If you want, you don't have to build up your troops. You can just do area control, get some points, do this, do that. Well, it's not even area control, it's worker play. So you can do combat or you can just not even bother with combat. It's totally up to you, man. So I think you're going to have fun playing this game.
Nice. Looking forward to it. All right, Steve, anything for you this week?
Nothing in particular in terms of a specific game, but with the holidays coming up and some vacation time, I am looking forward to playing a lot of online games with my friends, and I always look forward to our weekly game nights.
Nice.
Right on. So today I got delivered a Kickstarter that I've been waiting for quite a while. It was mentioned on one of my top 5 Kickstarters awaiting arrival list, and that is It's a Wonderful World. This is a game by Frederic Guerard and published by Le Bois de Joux. It's a French publisher. I've actually had a couple of their games in the past, always beautiful productions, always interesting mechanisms. And so I was pretty excited about this one for a while. I missed the first Kickstarter. I didn't miss it, but I just opted not to go in on it. I wasn't sure if it was a good fit for me. After it got delivered, I think it was late last year or early this year, I saw some reviews on it. It looked a lot of fun. A nice kind of mid-weight drafting game, that drafting and resource management that just struck my fancy. I love the card art, the theme, the colors in it. Just looks like fun to me. So I did back the last one. And this one, of course, because this is what you do on Kickstarter, is I didn't just back the base game. That's really all you need is a small box, like a fort-size box. Instead, I went in with the $100 game, the Heritage box, which includes the base game plus like half a dozen, expansions and extra cards and stuff like that, and then an extra expansion on top of that. So I got this delivery today, and the box is massive. I mean, it's like I don't even know what to compare it to, like a scythe size box, like height wise, not lengthwise, but height and depth. So it's a really big box. And really the base game, when I pulled all the components out, the base game really is it's 150 cards and a small cardboard board. And so you literally could put this in a tiny little box. But what's kind of cool about the expansions that came in this, and I'm excited to explore if I like the game, is that there are several kind of modular campaign expansions. So the idea being that it's a drafting game, you have 150 cards, and so everybody starts with like 7 or 8 cards, and you draft them, and you build resources over 4 rounds. So that's fun. But then each of the different expansions adds like a 5-game campaign where you can play 5 games in a row and kind of build things up. So, after the first game, decisions are made, and then there's actual booster packs that you will open up to get more cards out of there that are going to go into your deck, depending on the decisions that were made or the way the game went before. And some cards you can set aside. Each player can kind of build up their own little strategy over the 5-game campaign. And I love campaign type of mechanisms like this. This is semi-legacy because you do open those boosters, but in the future you could always reset it and replay them, which is even better to me. And then once you're done with those little campaign games, you can just shuffle in those cards that got opened up into the main deck, and you just have more variety in the deck to play on in the future. So it looks like a lot of fun, way too much packaging, way too big of a box, but really, they did a really nice storage kind of solution in there. So it all works. It's beautiful. It takes up too much space on the shelf. But I'm really excited to play it. I think it's kind of a nice midweight game, so I think I'll get to play that with Jen and Danielle probably over this Christmas break and try it out. I'm looking forward to it. So that's the thing I'm looking forward to this week. All right, I think that'll wrap up this episode of Board Game Hot Takes. Tell us what you thought of our takes on the game we played today. We'd love to hear from you. Until next week, take care, everybody.
Later.
Bye-bye.